Hey everyone, this is Alex from Ninja Teacher, and today we're going to be talking about vaccines, and specifically vaccines for teaching English in Vietnam, because this is a question that we get asked quite a lot over in our Facebook group, in comments here on YouTube, and by people that are coming out through us to teach English out here. So it's an important topic to cover, I think. And obviously I'm not a medical professional, and everything I say here is just stuff that I want to point you in the right direction with, so that you can do your own research, you can figure out if it's right for you. I highly recommend you go to a doctor, get advice from them, and also look online at other good resources to help you make that decision as well. Okay, so I'm going to go through the vaccines that you are going to want to consider getting, but before that I just want to cover a few pointers that will give you some perspective on the whole vaccinations thing. Okay, so the first one is that from my understanding, a lot of these vaccines are for different diseases that you'll get only from being in very rural areas. So if you're going to cities like Ho Chi Minh City or Hanoi in Vietnam or some of the other big cities, they may not actually be prevalent there, the diseases. So that's something to consider. Just look up for each different disease where you might expect to find it. Is it only rural areas? Is it cities as well? But from what I've seen and what I've read, most of these you aren't going to be affected by in the big cities. So that brings me on to my second point, is where are you going to be traveling to while you're out here? You may be based in one of the big cities, but you may be wanting to travel to different countries where you will be more exposed to different viruses and diseases. So then you should consider those countries, research those countries, what you might want to get for that country specifically. Now, a lot of these vaccinations, you have to do them far in advance, some up to 6 months, and it's like spaced out over a few months. So look into that, and if you're planning to teach English in like a year's time or something, maybe looking to start doing it now. Now, what I think is an important point to consider is that there are, say, 100 million Vietnamese people living in Vietnam. There are hundreds of English teachers out here that I've met, a lot of them personally, that I know have come out here and not had any vaccinations or vaccines done. Now, I'm not necessarily recommending that. I'm just saying that there are a lot of people that don't. And also, as soon as you start reading up about all the tropical diseases out there, reading about all these different medications you should be taking, apparently, it can get a bit overwhelming, you can get stressed out, and you're going to think you need to do all of them. And yes, maybe for peace of mind you should, but there are people that don't. And now that's just something to consider when you're weighing up doing all of these different ones. Try and figure out which ones are the essentials, which ones are more optional, which ones are dependent on different areas, and just make informed decisions and don't get into that panic of, oh my gosh, I need to do all these different vaccinations, otherwise I'm going to die of some tropical disease. Now, of course, it's important to take this seriously, but there are things to consider, like side effects, high costs to get these vaccinations done, and even the fact that maybe in the West, doctors aren't really that sure about exactly what you need for different countries. So just keep that all in mind, and now let's dive into what some of the popular and well-known vaccinations are. So I've taken this information primarily from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention website, which I'll link below, and you can actually go check that out yourself, as well as what our teachers have told us that doctors have recommended to them. So the two most common and highly recommended vaccinations for Vietnam are hepatitis A and typhoid. So these are diseases that you can get from contaminated food or water. So yeah, that makes sense. That could happen to you no matter where you are. Although, yes, again, they are normally found in rural areas. But those are the most highly recommended two that I've seen come up over and over again. So after those two, there are a number of other ones that are often recommended, but I feel like people do these less often than those first two that I just mentioned. There's also hepatitis B, and that's more from needles, blood, sexual contact, that kind of stuff. So if you're getting tattoos or piercings or medical procedures done, that's kind of when you want to consider this one. Now, malaria shows up on the list, and this is kind of one of the ones that falls into that category of doctors prescribing it, and it doesn't really make sense to me. The reason I say that it is very rare in Vietnam and the drugs you have to take for it are pretty hardcore. I've heard of people getting really bad side effects, and you have to just keep taking them. So if you're coming out to live out here, the small risk of getting malaria versus taking that medication long term, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So again, not a healthcare professional, but there's those little things that you might want to just try and research a bit more to make sure if it does make sense for you. Another one, rabies. Yeah, sure, you could get a rabies vaccination, but I don't really see many rabid dogs running around in Vietnam. Honestly, I've never seen a dog that looks even threatening, let alone kind of diseased. Someone in our group was posting about this and saying the shot was about 120 pounds, and that's quite a lot. And you know, there are drugs that you can take if you do get bit afterwards, but then it can be even more expensive. So maybe the peace of mind of getting it beforehand makes sense. And then the last one on the list is Japanese encephalitis. From what I've heard, it's not very common in Vietnam, but up to you to research how prevalent it is and if it's one that you might want to consider doing. There was one guy in our group, I thought I'd just mention this, who posted he's been living in Vietnam for 15 years and has never heard a case of it. So that's just something to bear in mind. Then lastly, doing all your regular vaccinations is also recommended. Measles, mumps, all those kinds of things. One other thing I thought I'd just bring up, because it is something that can occur in Vietnam, is dengue fever. Now, there isn't a vaccination for this, but I thought it would be a good idea just to mention it, because if you're coming out here, you want to know about all the possible things that might affect you, and dengue is one of them. It's on the rise out here, and basically it's a kind of tropical fever that lasts about a week, and you're just really sick. It's like flu-like symptoms, very painful apparently, but then after that usually it goes away and doesn't cause anything, but it can reoccur is the issue once you've had it once. So even if you are getting vaccinations, there's still some things that you do have to be aware of that could happen. I do recommend having good travel insurance when you start out. You can even get some insurance when you arrive in Vietnam, or getting international health insurance is definitely a good idea. Look into what options there are back home before you start traveling. Okay, that's all the common ones that I know of. If there's anything else that you've heard of, you can post a comment below if you have any tips and suggestions. Again, I just want to reiterate, do your own research, look into it, make sure that you've spoken to a doctor, and make informed choices. I just wanted to bring your attention to this issue in this video more than actually answer what you should and shouldn't do. And hopefully this points you in the right direction towards doing some more research yourself and then making decisions based on that. Okay, that's it for this video. Make sure to stay tuned for more videos about teacher English and life in Asia, and I will speak to you very soon. Peace.